Oftentimes, what we look at, we think to be reality. But is it?
Reality really is in the eye of the observer.
It can often be difficult to believe in magic.
Consciousness with a big C is actually running the show, and it always has been.
How good can it get?
I think all it really takes is having an open mind.
There has to be a release of that control and a relaxation of those beliefs to even allow consciousness to enter in this way.
Inviting humanity to start looking much more deeply at who we really are.
Individuals holding a vibrational resonance and an awareness or an openness, the Mandela Effect.
Welcome. You have entered the realm of 1111 Talk Radio. Your host is Simran. It's time to discover your own language with the universe. Empower yourself, broaden your mind, open your heart, and discover who you are. Now, here's your host, Simran.
In today's challenging times, your mind may be sending you in many different directions. It can often be difficult to believe in magic or in something other than what we see. Oftentimes, what we look at, we think to be reality. But is it? It might very well be the illusion. And what you think of as illusion might very well be reality. Today, we are talking about the Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect encourages us to develop a sense of trust in what these experiences invite us to know and see beyond habituated beliefs, patterns, and conditioning. Some Mandela effects appear to be something akin to miracles. When we see previously extinct species return, human anatomy changing for the better, and the idea that anything at all can be instantaneously transformed, such as in first-hand personal healing experiences. And this is something that is described in depth in a new book titled The Mandela Effect, which I invite you to explore. It is quite fascinating and quite in-depth in terms of the research, how she shares, and her own personal experiences. Cynthia Sue Larson is the best-selling author of several books, including The Mandela Effect and Its Society, Quantum Jumps, Reality Shifts, and High Energy Money. She has a degree in physics from UC Berkeley, an MBA degree, a Doctor of Divinity, and a second-degree black belt. And what Cynthia Sue Larson is here to remind us is to ask in every situation, how good can it get? Cynthia, it's so wonderful to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Simran. It's such a pleasure to be with you too. And I love what you're doing with magazine, the talk radio, all the work that you're doing. So it makes such a difference in these times.
Thank you so much. It is a time where it's so easy to grip onto the fear, and as empathic as I am, I can feel a lot of what individuals around me are experiencing, or even energetically what appears to be taking place surrounding whether it's an individual or even if it's in crowds of protesting or different things that are taking place. There is this blanket that lay across there that is buying into a reality that the eyes may see, but the single eye or the aligned eye and mind actually may not agree with if we were to tune into that. I want you to start off by framing where we are in terms of these two realities and how it might be possible to shift from one to the other.
This is a great starting question. On the cover of my book, I've got two realities on the Mandela Effect and its society in the form of two crystal balls. We often want to know what's the future, what's the reality. And the brighter future tends to be the one that's full of love, respect, and connection. And it's got so much optimism to it. I love to be an optimist myself. The other reality can be thought of as one that's more drama, and that's really the best word, drama based. So it's something called the drama triangle, which is tied up with fear and victims consciousness, and also usually pointing fingers at the perpetrator. What's interesting is it doesn't seem like that cycle actually goes anywhere. Typically, The people who feel victimized by others are themselves then, in turn, perpetrators of further atrocities of some sort. So that's why it's called the drama triangle. It's the technical name. It's actually the Karpman drama triangle. And the way that we can actually rise above that. Now, this may not sound like physics. My background is in physics. And what I'm talking about right now sounds like psychology. It sounds like energy. But when you're talking about these two different realities, and when, as physicists, we start understanding that reality itself has a much more subjective component to it, that means reality really is in the eye of the observer to a much greater effect than most people have any idea. Objectivity is an assumption that is cast upon us that we tend to grow up with. We learn about it in science and in school. But if you recognize that what you think and you assume to be objectivity is actually a worldview, and you might be captive within it, just like these two spheres on the cover of the book. These are reality bubbles or Wigner bubbles, the physics term. I know that those are not actual Wigner bubbles on the cover of the book. It's an artist's depiction. But if you look at Eastern art and you see a dragon holding a pearl, these Eastern ideas go back to the understanding that reality might just be a dream, might be a simulation. And in that sense, what we learned from quantum physics is that the observer has a definite effect, and that to collapse the so-called wave function of a system is to observe what you're set up and expecting to see. I know I've covered a lot of territory right there, but that's exactly what we're looking at from the layman's viewpoint and the physics side. But there are so many other indicators that that is what's happening. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
I appreciate all that you've shared right there. And I want to back up to that drama triangle because I look at what's taking place. I am able to come from a very neutral perspective of saying, if we just look at the political system, we've got two sides, each one fighting for what they believe, each one fighting for what they think is right. And part of me says, with the type of mindset and consciousness that takes place, it really doesn't matter who's in charge, it still would be the same outcome because the consciousness is holding that type of friction, duality, division already within it. And unknowingly, these two sides are behaving in the same exact way as the finger that they're pointing toward. Does it really matter who's in charge if that's the consciousness taking place?
We're not really even clarifying what the two sides are. I love that. That's perfect. A lot of people might be assuming they know. They might be looking at a particular conflict in the world. We might be looking at American politics. In any of these cases, it doesn't really matter who's in so-called charge because the underlying, sort of like there's a structure or a foundation that humanity is operating under, which is this assumption that one side can win and a worldview can be superimposed on everyone. Now, usually I'd say that it doesn't really matter at all who's so-called in charge. I think if you're looking at American politics, there actually is some advantage in the dismantling that's happening. I know the whole thing's very upsetting and traumatic for people, but some of the dismantling that's going on with some of the things that are being dismantled, if we didn't do it on purpose, the way the current political administration under Donald Trump is doing, it would come ripping apart pretty much this year from some of the economic indicators that I've seen. I have an MBA degree also, as well as a physics degree. When I look at this, I'm looking at not necessarily what the political parties themselves are saying, but I'm looking at futurists, I'm looking at economists. Some of the outsiders are the most interesting. And what they're pointing out is that there were some inevitabilities, at least in the economic side of things, that go far beyond the tariffs and so forth. But to answer your question most succinctly, I'd say yes. It doesn't really matter who's in charge. Occasionally, I'll see that some of the things that an administration is doing are putting things more in conscious control and maintaining that a little bit longer. And maybe that's a good thing. What I actually see is that consciousness with a big C is actually running the show, and it always has been. And for evidence of that, we can look to our spiritual texts, such as the Bible with Revelations. Greg Braden has done an amazing job with some of the work he's done to decipher the Old Testament. If you read it like a code, then you can see that there are messages that apply to modern times, which is rather extraordinary. And then if you look at the Hopi prophecy rock carved in stone thousands of years ago, they actually prophesized exactly the split we're seeing now. They said it would happen. They gave us the timing and they described what to look for when everything started to split apart. So that's an indicator also that consciousness is actually running the show.
I feel that as well. I guess I've always called it love, that love will bring up everything unlike itself. And when there is a system that is not functioning in that frequency, it has to have that destruction that has to take place. It's like the Kali energy has to come in there, and it may not feel as good, but either way, regardless of who's in charge, that was going to take place. And I think the greatest illusion of all is that we believe we have control. In truth, we've never had control. We never did. There is always a bigger overarching power that is guiding and ruling everything. And so when we look at that, if there is a larger overarching power of consciousness or love that is guiding and ruling everything, how does that intersect now with the Mandela effect, with this ability of quantum jumping, of reality shifting, all the beautiful things that you so expertly speak about?
Thank you. The consciousness to me is what's behind everything. You mentioned my book, Reality Shifts. The subtitle of that first book that I published was When Consciousness Changes the Physical World. But I strongly believe that consciousness is foundational. To echo the words of physicist Max Planck, he said, you cannot get beneath consciousness. It's fundamental. The Mandela effect has been gaining a lot of popular interest. It's something that I would define as collective alternate memories. That means groups of people remembering things similarly that are quite different than the historical record says. And it can be everything from geography, human anatomy, animals, food, clothing, books, movies, history, every aspect of life, where we exist in the solar system and in the cosmos. Even the location of those places seems to be changing, seems to have changed. It's named after Nelson Mandela. I include a number of quotes from the actual Nelson Mandela in the book because it's meaningful that Nelson Mandela himself was the namesake for this phenomenon where history can be different and it seems like it's happening collectively. Nelson Mandela dedicated his life in South Africa to really representing the people. He was doing the best he could to be a pacifist, but he ended up incarcerated. Now, the name Mandela Effect came from people. I think Art Bell was one of the first people to publicly describe it in the media as something that's happening, where hundreds and then thousands of people were contacting Art Bell and saying, why is Nelson Mandela alive again? I remember he died when he was in jail. Now he's become president of South Africa. That's a good thing, but how did that happen? And it didn't really get the name Mandela Effect until the mid 2000s when Fiona Broome picked that up again, carried the torch forward from there. I'd been tracking this phenomenon, calling it reality shifts, calling it the alive again phenomenon for that specific example of someone dead being alive again. But to me, what it indicates is just what you're saying. Consciousness is absolutely just gently indicating to humanity that reality is what we might call like a dream, that we are both the dreamers and the experiencers of the dream. We're the ones who create the dream, and then we're the ones who dream it. And nature and love, the consciousness itself, is that Tao, the Holy Spirit energy surrounding both the dreamer and the dream. That's how this whole thing works. It looks like the yin yang symbol, where we've got polarities, like each person might feel different than their eternal infinite self. They also have a mortal physical being, but that duality, if you will, is held very lovingly in this form of consciousness itself. That's the same field of consciousness by which the collective alternate memories that we know as the Mandela effect are coming to our attention now, so that we start wondering, why is it that Nelson Mandela is alive again when so many of us remember so many similar, if not identical, details for this history that never occurred?
I specifically remember having that thought of, I thought Mandela had died. Like I remember having the moment when he was alive, but then I clearly remembered he had died. So this is really quite powerful. Nelson Mandela said, there is no passion to be found playing small. in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living. In addition, he said, it is in your hands to make a better world for all who live in it. Both of these quotes really do speak to much of what's being talked about here. How is that possible that we are now seeing a man, as you call, alive again, that was supposedly deceased? And how is that distinct from gaslighting?
Well, first of all, let's clarify. He's currently dead at the moment. This is 2025, as far as I know. Fine with me if he comes back again. But just to for people who are saying,
Yes.
wait a minute,
Yes.
yeah, he's dead right now. People don't know what gaslighting is, where it was an idea that showed up in a movie, and there was a man making his wife crazy by telling her the lights were the same and her vision was dimming when actually he was going around and dimming all the lamps in the house. So with gaslighting, there's this concept that people, I think it could be intentional, but I see it more frequently unintentionally. When I witness gaslighting, I see people who aren't being out and out evil, but more that they're members of a certain reality bubble or a Wigner bubble. That's the physicist Eugene Wigner. I'll explain that later, but they tend to think that reality is the way that they see it. When they see that reality is a certain way, and they assume things to be objective. I don't see that we're living in an objective reality, if we ever were. It certainly doesn't look like it with the two big realities splitting apart. So the gaslighting is frequently not intentionally done. What I see instead is that they sincerely, genuinely believe a set of facts and truths and histories that they take to be impervious to any kind of change. In other words, they think a history occurred. They think they are correct. They think the facts that matter are the ones they know. Then the next step, they're talking to someone who has experienced the Mandela effect, like yourself and me, and both of us remember Nelson Mandela did die when he was incarcerated on Robbins Island, maybe 1980s. Some people say 87. So the gaslighters would be looking at that and telling us, Simran and Cynthia, you are confused. You have gotten yourselves mixed up, and somehow you remember someone else died. Maybe it was Stephen Biko or somebody else, but you got confused. Then an argument might ensue if we went there. If you know what you know and you remember what you remember, you have anchor memories, and then maybe, like us, they found someone else who shares that memory. What can start happening instead is there's this separation occurring, like on the cover of the book, with the two realities forming separate timelines, if you will, where some people are aware that reality is changing, especially with regard to Nelson Mandela. They're aware that consciousness perhaps is playing a role in doing that. Maybe they're not sure why it's happening. Those who are doing the gaslighting, they have no clue that this reality separation is occurring. For them, they think there's just one reality bubble. They think, therefore, Simran and myself are misled, misguided, confused, or maybe just downright stupid. And they actually believe that. That way, they can continue functioning with the assumption that there's only one history, there's only one timeline, only one reality. Whereas those of us who do experience not just one Mandela effect, but dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of them, we're keenly aware that reality is splitting and that the Hopi prophecy rock is happening right now. And those two timelines that had been suggested to at one point start happening are occurring in our lifetime, and we're witnessing it.
What I love about your book, Cynthia, is that you provide a lot of detailed science, information, education about this, and many cases where you're depicting these different things having occurred. And not just by a few people, there are large swaths of people that experience some of these things, even though there's this common assumption that experiences might be suffering from false memories or collective misremembering, confabulation, but there is something that's very different going on. And so the Mandela effect is something that someone really does need to experience themselves. And throughout the book, you also provide a series of exercises to support that strengthening.
Exactly. This is something that we can each experience. I think all it really takes is having an open mind. What a lot of experiencers notice when bringing the subject up at holiday gatherings with family, with friends, with neighbors, with coworkers, if they first just ask someone, have you noticed that Nelson Mandela is alive again? Or if they bring up something like the movie Snow White just was released with the live action, there's a scene in the movie when the queen is looking in a mirror. A lot of us remember she said, mirror, mirror on the wall. Supposedly, it's never been that. It's only ever been magic mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all? That may or may not be a big one, but when you add up just the sheer quantity of these things.
Today we are discussing The Mandela Effect and Its Society, Awakening from Me to We by Cynthia Sue Larson. A short list of some widely known Mandela effects that have made themselves evident to Cynthia Sue Larson over the years includes a change in the American Thanksgiving from the third Thursday of each November, the character Dolly having braces in the 1979 James Bond movie, Moonraker, the spelling of Haas avocados, the VW logo having been connected, Nelson Mandela having died twice, and Jane Goodall having been murdered within a month after Diane Fossey was killed in December 1985. Cynthia Sue Larson is the best-selling author of several books, including The Mandela Effect and Its Society, Quantum Jumps, Reality Shifts, and High Energy Money. RealityShifters.com. I want to invite you to the 1111 Collective. You can go to 1111mag.com and register there to be informed about all the shows, the new 1111 magazine issues, and to keep in touch with everything that's happening for your own personal growth and evolution. You are not on a journey, you are the journey. We'll be right back after these messages.
Simran is an award-winning author, publisher of 1111 Magazine, powerful speaker of wisdom, and a life mentor. Find out more at IamSimran.com. Now, back to 1111 Talk Radio.
Do join my Substack to be informed about all the shows, the new 1111 magazine issues, and to keep in touch with everything that's happening for your own personal growth and evolution. My publication is Beyond the Illusion, and you can find it at iamsimran1111.substack.com. That link is in the bio description. Receive all of the 1111 magazine issues on audio as part of that, in addition to the weekly prompt, inquiry, contemplation, and meditation that I provide to all of the subscribers on the annual membership. Through recognition of the Mandela Effect, humanity is accepting an invitation to think outside the Boolean true-false box and enter into a wonderfully interconnected, dynamic reality based in quantum consciousness. We are living in an extraordinary world. Like Cynthia Sue Larson says, to continually ask, how good can it get? Connect with her at realityshifters.com. Upcoming events. Number 1 is a monthly live stream online for Reality Shifters and those that want to explore more. Go to imac.world or realityshifters.com. Those links are in the bio description. In addition, August 22nd through 24th in Crestone, Colorado, be sure to attend a Journey to Consciousness in the Modern World with Julian Shamaroy, Cynthia Sue Larson, and Paola Harris. At this time of great challenges, can we envision a golden age? Why does the question of UFOs matter for humanity at this time? And what hidden abilities do we possess that can transform our lives? That is the focus of A Journey to Consciousness in the Modern World, August 2025. Cynthia Sue Larson is the best-selling author of several books, including The Mandela Effect and Its Society, Quantum Jumps, Reality Shifts, and High Energy Money. Subscribe to her free monthly e-zine at realityshifters.com.
What's interesting is even if people are noticing, like, hey, this is weird, they might not be ready at that juncture to hop on board with the idea that reality itself is changing. They might just think, that's weird, and let's go back to the regular daily life. I don't want to deal with that. What's very interesting about the phenomenon is that it seems like at some certain moment, an individual usually will have a personal Mandela effect or a personal reality shift where suddenly they know for sure something's different, and then their eyes are wide open to the whole phenomenon. And then they want to talk about it. When it's just a hypothetical, very few people outside of brilliant genius level theoretical physicists. I do know one, he just instantly understood. I apologized. I said, I'm sorry you're not in my book, Quantum Jumps. You didn't exist. I certainly would have put you there. Every time I give a talk, I make up for it. I show illustrations from your research papers every time I give a talk these days. And he said, yep, yep, yep. He had no concerns, and there was no discussion about it. That man is a complete genius. He co-authored papers with Alan Guth. So if you're a physicist at that level, then, and if you're a theoretical physicist working in the realm of ideas, then probably you're already keenly aware. Of course, there are realities that I don't exist in. Of course, Cynthia would have been writing her book, and he wanted a copy of it. I went to the car and got it out of the trunk. Here you go. You're not in it. I apologize again. I certainly would have put you in there because your work is top notch, and it's exactly the kind of thing I wanted to include. Instead, I only had other similar physicists, and he totally exists. But it's like he'd been scrubbed out of all my searches on Google. You can do a Google search for papers and research. So there's something called Google Scholar. None of his papers were there previously, which is impossible. He's written hundreds of them. That's Dr. Yasunori Nomura, brilliant physicist at UC Berkeley. It's that sort of thing. So until something like that happens to a person, so unless you're that level of genius and theoretical physics is your bag and your daily life and you live, sleep, and breathe it, then it could be quite a shock when you suddenly find yourself face to face with something just stunning. Like I've heard from people that said I had died in their realities. But because I've been studying this for 25 or 27 years, for me, that's understandable. I can appreciate it and go into what did they experience.
So we really are talking about parallel realities, individuals holding a vibrational resonance and an awareness or an openness to possibility of a different reality for them then to be able to step into that or experience it.
Yes. For me, this entire topic is inviting humanity to start looking much more deeply at who we really are. I think we often assume that we know. I think we're coming back to that consciousness thing again. If we assume that what we know is that I'm just a physical being, this is what I was taught in school or what they tried to teach me. I didn't really believe it, but they said consciousness itself is an epiphenomenon. It arises out of our brain and our DNA. You know, according to the official story in Western science, as currently taught in many schools in America right now, it's taught that anytime you have a thought, it's coming up through the neurons in the brain, that there's something that's sort of coming out of. It's an emergent process. Consciousness emerges out of physical matter. And I'm going to repeat myself a little bit again. I'm going back to, I actually do not agree with that. I instead agree with Max Planck, the father of quantum physics, who said consciousness is fundamental. You cannot get behind consciousness. So that means consciousness is not emerging from brains and DNA and neurons. No, consciousness created brains and DNA and neurons. And we see things like this in the ideas of Rupert Sheldrake with his morphogenic fields. There's no way to prove this yet, because how do you prove something to people's satisfaction when they're ensconced in the material realism idea? They're really in that paradigm. And that's part of the paradigm that's splitting away as well. Back to the cover of the book and what's really happening here. Those humans who can identify with being our eternal infinite selves, those of us who can identify with what if we are consciousness, and what if we're witnessing that as consciousness, we can jump between parallel universes. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes. And then for those material realists who they're the ones that you might say they're gaslighting us, I would say they don't know what they're doing. I'd say they think we're stupid and we're clueless or that we're crazy. I can see it from their point of view. And most of us who now see the Mandela effect used to be like that. We too were raised with those ideas. We too went to those classrooms, learned from those teachers, read those books. But then if you start looking at quantum physics, or if you start experiencing Mandela effects and reality shifts in your own life, then that's when this high sense perception begins, and it's an extraordinary human experience that's an awakening. And a lot of humans have been having awakening experiences just in the last 5 or so years, these extraordinary years of human history.
I want to go back to where we started at the beginning. And the reason I started there about politics and the two sides was to bring about this understanding that we have entrenched beliefs about who and what we are. We have levels of control as human beings where we just grip onto something and don't want to let go. But it seems like to really experience the Mandela effect, there has to be a release of that control and a relaxation of those beliefs to even allow consciousness to enter in this way inside of us to show us a different reality.
Yes, this is where meditation would come in. Often people talk about root level consciousness being root chakra, fight or flight. But there is a third mode that we can enter into, which is much more gentle. And it's one of just being pure observer. They call it rest and digest to really bring healing to yourself. If you're capable, instead of fighting or fleeing, some people call it freeze. But if you observe actual animals or humans doing this at the highest level, it's not really freezing. It's relaxing into a knowingness. It's kind of a surrender. It's a state of meditative awareness that allows instant, direct access to that infinite, eternal being, that spiritual state that we all have connection to, the Tao, the Holy Spirit. So that is always available. And that's, I think, the key to knowing that if we have that option, then no matter what things look like, and I think those of us who've been through difficult times have an intimate familiarity with what I'm discussing here. If you haven't, then it just sounds pretty out there. Like, really, fight or flight. That's all there is. Let's look at the example of a rabbit. In the wild, a rabbit is capable of knowing that it might be safer instead of fighting, and rabbits do fight. One of them attacked our President Jimmy Carter in the water, actually, of all places. That can happen. Or the rabbit has an option of fleeing. More often we see rabbits running. But what's the thing they do so well that's pretty much their master trick? And that would be freeze. And I've seen animals in the wild. I was on a walk with my dog once. We walked within about 3 meters of a great blue heron on the side of the road. And I held love and reverence in my heart, just an agreement at that very high level of infinite eternal being with its spirit. I just agreed with it. I'm going to mask your presence from my dog. My dog is very telepathic, and so I know that if I'm visualizing, there's a great blue heron that's as big as almost as big as you, it's within 10 feet. I did not broadcast that. Instead, I concealed it. I chose that I would honor the beauty, the magnificence of that great blue heron. And so I could see it in the bird that it was just calm. It was in that state. Freezing does it a disservice because it was staying still, but it was in that infinite eternal moment that animals know how to do too. It's a master level move. And that's what I believe humans are getting called into right now. We're getting called into a meditative state of awareness, which is to be reflective. Meditators often experience this. People who've been through near death experiences would know what I'm talking about. And anybody who's been through any kind of extraordinary human experience has the invitation to access this level of consciousness where just through stillness, we're capable of starting to witness much greater truth of who we are and what reality is.
Your discussion on fight, flight, and freeze brings to mind conversations around trauma that are taking place these days. It's become a very heightened conversation. Oftentimes it focuses on the fight or flight, but in extreme trauma, freeze does tend to be the state that occurs. And in that freeze state, having experienced it myself, there really is nothing that can be done. And I've experienced even where there's no thought, it completely disappears. With all that's taking place right now, whether it is manipulated or whether it is controlled or a product of overall consciousness, is there an intelligence even to our mechanisms of freeze to get us to this place of being open enough?
Absolutely. One of my favorite meditations is to go into that no thought place, to seek it intentionally. When people first hear, like, there's no thought, and if they've tried doing a slow your thoughts down to a stop exercise, then they have firsthand experience like that can be pretty tricky to do. Yes, I do seek it on purpose. I love it. It's my go to for attaining clarity of and purity of heart and being at a level that I find just the cleanest, the purest, the ultimate, the optimal. So I love it, love it, love it. And when I hang out in it for maybe, there's no such thing as linear time when you're there, but if you happen to see a clock when you come out of it and it's been about 20 minutes, that's really good. 20 minutes of no thinking is a bliss out experience. And I feel like I come out of that revolving door into all these possible parallel worlds in the optimal reality. To me, it's the ultimate magic trick. If you feel like this world is pretty bad and you keep asking my favorite question, how good can it get? And you go into that no thought experience, you're guaranteed to come out in a different reality. And if you go into it really genuinely longing to know how good can it get, no matter how bad or mediocre or even how good it might seem, there will be an improvement based on the fact that when we ask questions, nature answers. That's not my idea originally. That's I'm crediting physicist John Archibald Wheeler. He's the father of the black holes, white holes, it from bit, and so on and so forth, and the participatory universe, which is the emphasis of the questions that we ask, meaning so much. Going into that experience, this is guiding us. There is a consciousness with a capital C that's behind everything, all this madness, the chaos, the seeming discontent, all the drama. When we access this area of no thought, I think it's a high speed evolutionary jump kick. And so it looks like when humanity as a whole is put through various crises where we look at, of course, fight and flight, those are the go to that humans are so familiar with. That sounds like warfare and the typical stuff that fills the history books. Our history books don't usually talk about freeze. That for that you go to your philosophy books, the spiritual books, the meditative books. That's where you start seeing into these other worlds and you start seeing another level of reality that's, if you look deep enough, you'll see it's been there the whole time. And it's definitely an invitation to us at this time of evolutionary transformation for the planet, for all of humanity. Every single one of us who welcomes that and has that open minded attitude to go into this experience of fight, flight, or freeze, and how good can that get? I would choose door number 3, freeze, and then take freeze to the highest level of grace and divinity and love that's possible. And boy, is that possible. And then when you come out of that door, just remember in your heart, how good can it get? Not just for yourself, but for everyone and everything, for all it is. And then you're part of a team that you may not yet see. I think people that are listening to your show that know what you're doing, that follow what I'm doing, they understand what I'm talking about. Even though you might feel alone, you're not alone. And we really are all as one, even with great blue herons, rabbits, and all that is.
That is exactly what experience I had that I depict in my latest trilogy. It is about really facing what life is bringing and allowing that to transform us in its own way. You said just now, in the time that we are in this time of consciousness that is rising, and that's a statement that many individuals tend to use at this time. Why is the Mandela effect happening, and has it always been happening and we're just more aware, or is it this time that is bringing this about more and more?
I believe if you read my book, there's evidence to show it's been around for at least hundreds of years. I believe it's actually been tens of thousands of years. I think it's been around since humans have been around. But it's been a background level thing that's only been an experience available to those individuals at such a level that we're talking about today. Meditation masters, martial arts masters, yogis and gurus, that kind of thing, shaman. They would absolutely have access to all of this. Of course they did. They would know. And that's why the villagers in each tribal community would go to these individuals when you need to have help with the weather, when there's been a drought, when there's been a flood, whatever's happened. It's time to call in the one who can recognize that as you think it, so it is. And so that would be these individuals. But now it's interesting because if you think of it like a curve, when you grade on the curve, one teacher might grade on a C curve. And so most people in the class get a C, but you can move the curve. It looks like the population of the planet is moving into the curve point, the big bump part, where more and more of us are easily able to manifest reality shifts, to do things as we think it, so it is. And this is that rising consciousness. Hope you say this is our fourth world, that the world's ended 3 times. We're in the fourth. We're about to go to the fifth. I hope you say this, we're going to go through 7 of these. Boy, does that sound like energy chakras to me. And I notice that right now we've been working on our heart chakra. We are genuinely doing our best to love each other no matter what. Some people would say we're not doing so well at it. Okay, the glass is half full, or maybe the glass is half empty, but whichever way you look at it, we're totally working on that fourth chakra. What we're moving into that I see is moving into the fifth chakra. This is our communication chakra at the throat. And so whatever we're thinking, whatever we're saying, whatever we're writing are words of manifestation. And so there's a split happening right there for people who are not asking the questions they want to live the answers to. Those realities will be collapsing of their own. They're just going to disintegrate because if you're creating something you don't want to live in, nobody populates it. So that's a Wigner bubble, a reality bubble that's empty. It's a literal parallel universe that nobody wants to live in. Whereas if you're asking the questions you do want to live the answers to, like how good can it get for all concerned? Well, that's going to be populated for sure. That's going to be the optimal reality of how good can it get, the Shambhala, the path forward into the fifth world, from there into the sixth and into the seventh. Will it be the ultimate optimal reality? Apparently not yet, according if you believe the Hopi prophecy. And if you're following along with just looking at how humans are doing with our chakras, I think it looks like the Hopis are probably right. I think we're still working on the heart chakra. So we're about to see very interesting division occur. So this is a good point for people to start really thinking about the questions you're asking. The reason I ask how good can it get is because I think people need a reminder instead of what's going to go wrong next. I actually hear people saying, I've had two things go wrong. These things come in three. What's next? Oh my gosh. And I would recommend, wait a minute, cancel, cancel. Instead of asking what's going to go wrong, let's ask how good can it get? And people do the same thing, pointing fingers at those who they think are creating the problems right now. They say, what are they going to do next? I ask, how good can it get? No matter what it looks like they're doing. So this is our big opportunity to step into the next big roots for the next big evolutionary transformation and change. And I think we're actually seeing it right now. Some people wonder, will we see it in our lifetimes? I say yes. I'm actually witnessing changes in the physical body for all humans on the planet. Yeah, that's 8 billion of us, and it's happening. It's already starting.
It really does require that ongoing practice of working with the mind, anchoring into that heart space and feeling everything that has to be felt so that it can be transmuted through creativity and using that creativity in a way that we're fueling it toward the worlds that we want to create. You talk about 3 different methods of employing and discerning whether something is a genuine Mandela effect, finding the anchoring of the memories, the flip-flops, and the confirmation with others.
The flip-flops are interesting. I think if anybody's ever noticed, I'm talking now to the Mandela Effect community, because otherwise they're not going to know what I'm talking about. But it's like you notice that a Mandela Effect occurs, like Costco. I saw that signage change to Costco. It's a business in America. COSTCO turned into COSCO. And I'm not confusing it or conflating it with the other business. I'm aware of the other business. Literally talking about Costco itself. Now, at the time I saw this change, there was so much happening in my personal life that I had no wavelength or anything to deal with that. So it was a peripheral annoyance. I could see it on the peripherally, just like noticing, like there's another ad. Like, gosh darn it, they've changed that spelling and that annoys me. That's just how I took it. About the time my personal drama cleared up, the next time I saw Costco, it was back to Costco. And I was surprised because I'd sort of seen it peripherally that it had been COSCO and it had been very annoying in the difficult time that I went through, and now it's back. That's a flip flop. And I'm mentioning all my own personal things because I think that is relevant with what I notice about the Mandela effect. It often is associated with the vibratory frequencies that we're in. So it's almost like I was visited a slightly crummier universe when I was having some crummy problems. Very funny. It didn't seem funny at the time. And if you're noticing a flip flop, and I've seen lots of them in my personal life, like a neighbor's gutters on their house, they had no special leaf guards. And then one day, the whole house was covered in very high end, fancy, expensive leaf guards as if they'd been installed overnight. And I pointed that out to my husband, and we're both staring at it like that's odd. And then maybe a day or two later, the house had no leaf guards, and that was flip flopping. When you see that kind of thing, then you know for sure this is not your imagination. You're witnessing something genuinely bizarre because there's no explanation. There's no Occam's razor to more simply explain what you're witnessing, other than you're going back and forth through parallel realities. Thankfully, we've got the internet. For something like Costco, I can go on the internet and find out, hey, I'm not the only one who's seen these inferior realities. I'm just calling it that to be funny, but it felt that way, which are spelled Cosco. So I'm not the only one. Yay. Misery of, suffering through that loves company. But people can come together and recognize there's truth to this. Okay, memory anchoring, what that involves is associating at a time something happened where you were and what you were doing. Like for me, I heard James Earl Jones' voice booming in a theater the weekend that the Star Wars movie was first released. I had intended to go to the state fair. My friend and I were science fiction buffs. We looked at the movie theater, which is right next door to the state fair, and it said Star Wars opening weekend. We just looked at each other and we just grinned and we walked into the movie theater. Anyway, we stayed in that movie theater and watched the movie, I think at least twice. I remember James Earl Jones, his voice booming. So when I saw the movie where I got anchor memories of hearing James Earl Jones, the actor, playing the role of Darth Vader, saying, Luke, I am your father, and the way it reverberates, the intonation of that. Now, supposedly, it's only ever been, no, I am your father. So that would be one anchor memory. I think the strongest anchor memories for me are singing a song that I know, like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Now the song's always been, It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood. I never sang along to that when I was a mother of young children, even a child growing up with that. That was a long-lived TV show. Anchor memories are something that you maybe sang along with it or that you just know for sure it happened the way you remember it, even though now there's no evidence to suggest it ever did. And those are three ways that you can, the community of other people, flip-flops, and then something that you remember so clearly, like I was there, this is why I remember it. Something amazing happened that anchors that memory for me, so I know.
In the Mandela Effect and its society from me to we, that statement, awakening from me to we, how does that coincide with this Mandela Effect? How are we still in this place of me, and how do we get to that we, Cynthia?
It's a journey. It really is. When we think about our own selfish interests, then we're just thinking our life is just for ourselves. When we recognize that what we're seeing is collective influence of collective consciousness having positive impacts in our physical body, such as it seems to be doing, it seems like things that we may have considered insoluble problems could conceivably be cleared collectively by us all asking that same question: how good can it get for all of us? When we let go and relinquish the idea that winning is only if someone else loses, and we're moving into more of the win-win-win idea, then we're capable of experiencing very high level of cooperative collaboration so that we're co-creating reality in a way that just because something looks one way, we know that we're able to observe it at a higher level of consciousness and thereby exactly change the physical reality of what happens next. That's really the idea of these Wigner bubbles. The scientist Eugene Wigner was observing another scientist and recognizing that that second scientist could be capable of witnessing a completely different reality than what the first one experienced. And that's been proven in laboratory experiments. That's what we're capable of doing together. We can lift each other out of pretty much any hardship. I know that sounds airy-fairy. I'm aware of that, but there's physics behind it. And I do the best I can in this book to show this is how I see that we're together creating a whole new world. And we're the beginning of it. It's a very exciting time.
You put a lot behind what you're saying. This is a jam-packed book. All kinds of information, studies, proof, examples, methodologies, practices to really help the individual not only see for themselves through the research that you've done, but then experiment for themselves in a way that they can understand it. As we start to grow, oftentimes what doesn't resonate anymore with us, what doesn't vibrate with us, falls out of our life in terms of people, places, and things, and others start to show up. Is that an example of some of this shift?
That's a good way to put it. That's understandable. People can see that that happens, and it's something that they can recognize occurring. Sometimes there's a bittersweet feeling to that. For those of us who are very sentimental, we have good memories of happy times when the worlds were more united. And it does seem like things are just sort of pulling apart right now. Pulling apart in different ways. People right now might disagree with how it's pulling apart. But point is, I think everyone can agree something is pulling apart. To find the grace through this time, the way that we do have spiritual family. Look at the way that we are all family with all the other species, that our family is much greater than it may seem. And so if people are listening and they feel sad or they feel like there's been a separation or they've lost something, please know that that feeling of loss is transitory. And there's a new invitation now to a greater connection, to a greater family of humans that are coming through this together. Because we're going through sort of a shock wave, we may go through different traumas and difficulties, but we can reunite with an awareness that love pulls us together and that there is a joy in appreciating the differences and respecting the sovereignty and the divinity within each and every one and everything.
You write in your book, The Mandela Effect and its Society, walking in two worlds of experiencing a deeper level of reality while simultaneously living an ordinary life can feel unsettling and unforgettable as a threshold is reached that cannot be denied. That's a difficult place sometimes for individuals, having that foot in two worlds and trying to cross that bridge. Any suggestions?
I just saw a new sport. It looks like there was skiing and then there was snowboarding, and now there's snowboarding with a wind sail. But I was watching it and thinking, isn't that amazing? They're holding onto a sail, which occasionally lifts them up in the air and they're flying. And then they get set back down in the snow again on their snowboard. And then they navigate a few more turns and then they catch another breeze and up in the air they go. I think it feels a little like that. It's when I saw that, I thought that's a familiar feeling. That is a familiar feeling to have feet in both worlds. When we have one foot in that world of the spirit, that knowingness that we are the consciousness that jumps between the realities, that practice that I described of go into no thought. When you come out, that other foot is you're going to put your little foot down in a different physical reality. And that's okay. This is something that we're made to do. We can develop a sense of fun for a sport that never did really exist before. What I'm doing is very similar. And I think we're all going to be doing that. Feels like flying is when you're the infinite eternal you. You literally can land in a completely different reality that can be so much better than anything you even thought possible. You can ask, how good can it get? Blow my socks off. And I'm not talking about being greedy here or any of the other vices associated with the seven deadly sins or the Buddhist torments. I just mean better in the truest, deepest sense of goodness. There used to be truth, beauty, and goodness recognized as qualities that we sought, we honored. And that's what I'm talking about. We know goodness when we feel it. It's that awareness that there's real grace in every moment, recognition of the divine spark in every being, a sense of joy and a sense of heaven on earth. And when we have that, that's what I'm talking about. And we can literally experience that right now, and we can bring that into being. And it doesn't need to take as long as people might think, because humans are capable of literally making these quantum jumps together, from me making one little selfish quantum jump for just me to we, where we're quantum jumping to a whole new heaven on earth together. I know we're doing it. I know we can do it. That's my invitation, is let's ask that question together. How good can this get for all of us?
I love that analogy of the sail and the snowboard. That one was a really great one to visualize and feel through this conversation. And it leans me into the place of the unknown, which is oftentimes what people fear. We fight because we don't like where we are, but we also equally fight and resist that unknown place. And I think that that's what keeps us stuck in the struggle. We don't really choose a path, one or the other. We just straddle the fence of both. And you write in your book, you can tell you are crossing a threshold into the unknown when you've arrived in unfamiliar territory. You know you're on the edge of the unknown when experiences feel so foreign that your worldview is shaken to the core. It's integral sometimes to have that worldview shaken to the core, because that's the only way that the old world can shatter for a new one to be born. How does someone allow that world to shatter in a way that they can hold that? How good can it get phrase inside their heart and mind solidly as the anchor?
Well, that can be a process. It's okay. I'm not expecting everyone is just an instant master of that art. That's why I mention it so often. Pretty much every video I do, I end it with how good can it get? I put those reminders out constantly because I don't expect it'll be necessarily something people remember to do at first. I wish it had been built into our society everywhere. That's up to us. We're going to have to be the ones to share this and spread that how good can it get seed everywhere we go. Say it to friends, family, write it down, make it in notes and art, put it everywhere to remind ourselves because I think we do need those reminders right now. And it's okay if we need reminders, but eventually I know that we can get to that point where it becomes part of who we are and it becomes the expectation. No matter what dream you wake up in, might feel like a nightmare. You'll remember, even in a nightmare, wait a minute, how good can this get? And that's when you'll know, like, oh, I've got this. I've got this. When we help reminding each other, we can pull ourselves up by this bootstraps, if you will, into this fifth world so that we can collectively keep creating things that we genuinely do wish to live through. I think it's the best way to do it. I love doing it. I love the art of reminding each other because I think this is very important. We're not alone. We are one with a whole bunch of very interesting others, animals, plants. Some people are noticing that this is the age of disclosure with ETs and non-human intelligences. So them too. How good can it get for all of us? And I know they're excited for us to recognize that as well.
Thousands of Mandela effects have been documented in dozens of countries over the past 25 years, and the evidence of the global nature of the Mandela effect documented is on your website, realityshifters.com, where there are places for, quote-unquote, your stories to be shared or to read the stories of others. Upcoming events. Number 1 is a monthly live stream online for reality shifters and those that want to explore more. Go to imac.world or realityshifters.com. Those links are in the bio description. And she has a workshop coming up August 22nd to 24th in Crestone, Colorado with Julian Shemeroy, Cynthia Sue Larson, and Paola Harris, A Journey to Consciousness in the Modern World. Go to starworkersusa.com to find out more. We now know the quantum processes are proven to occur in places where many scientists never expected to find them. The Mandela Effect and Its Society, Awakening from Me to We, by Cynthia Sue Larson, author of Quantum Jumps and Reality Shifts. RealityShifters.com. Cynthia is the founder of Reality Shifters, first president of the International Mandela Effect Conference, managing director of Foundations of Mind, and creator and host of Living the Quantum Dream podcast. She has a degree in physics from UC Berkeley, an MBA degree, a Doctor of Divinity, and a second-degree black belt. She's been featured in numerous shows, including Gaia, the History Channel, Coast to Coast AM, and the BBC. Thank you so much for spending time. To receive the 1111 Collective on Substack, click the link in the bio description below and join us. Become an annual subscriber or a Master Founder member and start to also receive 1111 Magazine on audio. It is an honor and a privilege to have you there. Until next week, in love, of love, with love and as love, be well.
Thank you for opening your mind to a new reality, your heart to greater compassion, and your experience of aliveness with 1111 Talk Radio. Join host Simran next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time to step through the gateway of conscious living. You are not on the journey. You are the journey.